A thunderclap rattled the windows as rain poured from the sky like a busted faucet, flooding gutters and streaking down the driveway in rushing streams. I watched the downpour from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, with a faint grin. My rain barrels, forest green, discreet, neatly positioned behind a privacy fence, were doing their job beautifully. Stormwater was flowing right where it should, into containers I'd installed to support my vegetable garden. It was legal, eco-friendly, and just plain smart. So imagine my confusion when I opened my mailbox that morning to find a violation notice from the Willow Glen HOA. The letter, stamped with their smug little logo of a pastel house surrounded by red tape, stated that my rain barrels were visually offensive to the neighborhood's natural aesthetic. I stared at the letter, then looked back at my barrels. They were practically invisible unless you went looking for them. Someone like Marlene Whitaker, the HOA president with a talent for inventing problems and a vendetta against anything she didn't personally approve. Marlene was infamous in our neighborhood. She once fined a guy for overly musical wind chimes. Her obsession with symmetry and uniformity bordered on pathological. She treated the HOA like her own personal fiefdom, ruling with clipboards and passive-aggressive newsletters. Her latest crusade was apparently against my rain barrels, which I had installed after a particularly dry spring left my backyard garden parched and my water bill sky-high. My wife, Claire, and I had moved into Willow Glen for the calm, tree-lined streets, decent schools, quiet neighbors. It was supposed to be a retreat, a place where we could enjoy weekend barbecues and the occasional evening under the stars. What we hadn't realized was that behind the manicured hedges and seasonal wreaths lurked a cabal of suburban tyrants hell-bent on enforcing a very specific brand of bland perfection. I called Marlene to clarify. She picked up on the third ring, her voice dripping with that synthetic sweetness that always made my eye twitch. "Brandon, even if the city allows it, the HOA has higher standards," she chirped. "Your barrels don't match the community's visual harmony. You have 10 days to remove them." Click. I stared at my phone. Visual harmony? These were rain barrels, not rusted-out cars or neon lawn gnomes. They were saving water that otherwise would have ended up in the storm drains, flooding lawns, and overloading our already outdated infrastructure. And now I was being fined because my efforts didn't match Marlene's imaginary style guide? I tried to appeal. I submitted a formal request with photos showing the barrels hidden from view. I included documentation from the city's own rebate program for water conservation and even a simple engineering diagram to show how my setup reduced runoff. Within 48 hours, I got a form letter, appeal denied. No explanation. Just Marlene's signature at the bottom like a final stamp of petty vengeance. So I started digging. And that's when I discovered the Clubhouse. Marlene's beloved headquarters for wine nights and HOA meetings sat on the lowest elevation in the entire subdivision. Its drainage system hadn't been updated since the early 2000s, and every time it rained, it only stayed dry because neighbors like me managed their own runoff. If someone were to, say, stop doing that, or better yet, guide a little extra water that way, the Clubhouse might experience a very inconvenient natural lesson. The idea was petty, sure, maybe even a little vindictive, but it was also technically legal. So I called my old college friend Chris, now a stormwater consultant, and ran the idea by him. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped his sandwich. "Bran, you could redirect a river if you wanted." "Stormwater? That's easy." And that's when the plan clicked. Not just for revenge, but to make a point. Marlene's obsession with visual perfection was destroying genuine sustainability efforts. If I couldn't win through logic, maybe I could win through irony. Sweet, soggy irony. I planned everything carefully. I was a civil engineer. I knew how to work with land. I reviewed local codes, pulled up elevation maps, and even dug into some of the original landscaping blueprints from when Willow Glen was developed. I found what I needed. An old irrigation channel, long since overgrown, that used to supply the community garden behind the clubhouse. It would take some work, but with a little creativity and gravity, I could revive it. While Marlene waged her war of paper citations, I quietly built what I jokingly called my passive-aggressive plumbing network. It wasn't even mechanical, just gravity-fed lines, hidden under mulch, and a few camouflaged outlets disguised by planters and trellises. Meanwhile, I played nice. I removed one visible barrel and replaced it with a fake trellis. I waved to Marlene's compliance scouts. I even gave Earl, the HOA's most overzealous volunteer, a water bottle when he passed by my house with his measuring tape. Then came the rain. A week later, a massive storm hit. Rain hammered rooftops, turned sidewalks into rivers, and thunder rolled like the drums of war. As predicted, my system worked like a charm. My backyard remained dry and cozy. My garden flourished. And the HOA clubhouse? Not so much. Lights flickered. The sump pump wheezed and failed. And by the next morning, water stains crept across the clubhouse carpet like nature signing its name. I strolled past the clubhouse with my coffee in hand, doing my best to look surprised. Marlene stood outside barking orders at two soaked maintenance workers. The front doors were propped open, box fans whirring helplessly against the smell of mildew, and a thick waterline snaked across the sidewalk. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just walked by whistling. But I wasn't done. That had only been a quiet demonstration of what could be done with a little engineering know-how and a lot of spite. Chris showed up later that day with donuts and blueprints. We reviewed footage from my security cameras, which had captured everything from Earl tripping over his own clipboard to the exact moment the clubhouse lights died. No evidence of tampering. Nothing illegal. Just water going where it was allowed to go. The HOA sent out a vague email titled, "Unexpected Drainage Event." Marlene blamed outdated infrastructure and unseasonably high rainfall. But the forecast showed more rain coming. And this time I was going to push it just a little further. I tweaked the system, just subtle changes. Increased flow rate, added secondary outlets, all concealed behind fake landscaping and flower beds. And for good measure, I planted 2 large bushes in front of the end pipes to make them look like decorative hedges. Marlene retaliated with more letters. She accused me of suspected non-compliant drainage activity. Not an actual violation, mind you. Just suspicion. She demanded access to my yard. I posted a laminated note to my gate. No access without warrant or emergency cause. HOA is not law enforcement. I knew the rules. So did she. She couldn't cross the line without exposing her own abuse of power. Instead, she escalated again. Earl started showing up daily. So I added motion-triggered floodlights and a speaker that played barking sounds whenever someone came too close. The next storm hit, and this time I turned the flow dial just enough to guarantee that the clubhouse's soaked carpets wouldn't recover. By now, neighbors were starting to notice. Some thought I had a magic roof. Others whispered about me being a rain whisperer. I said nothing. Let them wonder. Meanwhile, Marlene installed a clunky camera aimed at my yard mounted with duct tape on a rusted pole. I responded by planting a fast-growing sunflower right in front of it. Then came the forum. The HOA scheduled an emergency meeting to rally support. But the clubhouse was still drying out, so they had to host it in the local elementary school cafeteria. Marlene stood in front, flanked by tired board members, and launched into a rambling speech about unity and order and the dangers of independent landscaping. But halfway through, a retired teacher named Mrs. Fontaine stood up. Why are we spending so much time punishing residents when we haven't fixed the clubhouse drainage in a decade? More voices joined in. A young father asked why his kid's sandbox had warranted 3 warnings. A woman near the back asked why chalk drawings were suddenly a code violation. The room shifted. The murmurs became frustration, and frustration became outrage. By the end of the night, Marlene had lost control. The next morning, I got a handwritten note from 3 neighbors asking me to run for the HOA board. I laughed at first, and the guy who rerouted stormwater like a Bond villain? But the neighborhood was changing. People were waking up. Still, Marlene wasn't done. She filed an official cease and desist through the HOA's legal counsel, accusing me of environmental sabotage and acts of water-based aggression. I read the letter twice. Environmental warfare? I nearly spat out my coffee. Chris, upon reading it, grinned. She's desperate. Time to bury her in paperwork. And so we did. I presented my entire system at the next HOA meeting, every map, diagram, and regulation. I even had a signed letter from the city's environmental office stating my setup was beneficial and fully compliant. Then came the twist. James, a board member who'd remained quiet until now, stood up. I received a notice from the city, he said. They're investigating the clubhouse for illegal drainage modification. Someone covered 2 runoff grates with landscaping. He turned to Marlene. She froze. The room fell silent. The board voted to drop all actions against me. My setup was legal. Commendable, even. Then James made a motion to begin an ethics review of Marlene's conduct. She stormed out without a word. Weeks later, The clubhouse was condemned for environmental violations. The HOA replaced its leadership. James became president. I accepted a role as environmental officer. We rewrote the bylaws. We launched water-saving initiatives. We rebuilt the clubhouse with real drainage, rooftop collectors, and community irrigation. Marlene's house went on the market. She never attended another meeting. That spring, we held a neighborhood party, the Rain Barrel Bash. Kids played in the runoff slip and slide. Neighbors shared tips. Someone brought a barrel-shaped cake. And for the first time in years, Willow Glen felt like a community. Because sometimes all it takes is one well-placed rain barrel to redirect the flow.